I never thought that a Halloween toast would be the moment I watched my daughter-in-law try to drug me. Simone wore a lace mask, black with gold trim, pretending elegance. Her mother, Veronica, floated beside her in sequins, fake pearls rattling like marbles every time she laughed. The ballroom at the Langston Center flickered orange and violet. Someone in a skeleton suit juggled. My toast glass sat on the tray, freshly poured. I watched Simone lift her hand, drop a capsule, subtle, fast, and nudge it toward me. She didn't see me watching. I reached past her, smiling, chatting, and swapped it for Veronica's. The fizz swallowed it whole. I watched Veronica drink it. I kept smiling. That smile stayed glued to my face as the crowd circled, clapping for Miss Denise, matriarch, success story, woman of the hour, 66, recently retired, healthy. Too healthy for their plans, apparently. I tilted my real glass just enough to wet my lips. The Dom Perignon tasted off. Not poison, just expensive and fake, like the people clinking flutes around me. "Let's get to the toast," Marcus called from behind me. My son. My only son. He didn't know I'd seen. Or maybe he did. I raised the glass, pretending nothing happened, and spoke about legacy. The company I built from 2 trucks in Anacostia to a multi-million-dollar logistics empire. Carter Logistics had officially closed sale in July. I left that detail vague. No need to broadcast the number yet. I praised my team, my clients, my family. Simone gripped Marcus's elbow. Veronica blinked slower than before. She clutched her clutch tighter, then missed a step when she turned. I wrapped up quickly and stepped away from the mic, heart thudding. Not fear, something colder. A clock started in my head the moment I saw that capsule. A countdown. In the hallway, I texted Jerome Ellis, my attorney. "Activate red file. Confirm tomorrow." Then I texted Tamika Rowe at Atlantic First Credit Union. "Emergency appointment Monday. No delay." Back inside, people danced, took selfies, got drunk under flickering lights. Veronica sat down. Her smile slipped. I watched her blink too slow again, then press a napkin to her lips. I left before dessert. Simone watched me go. 4 months earlier, on July 6, 2025, I signed away Carter Logistics for $23 million, then walked out of the glass-paneled closing office without fanfare. No balloons, no champagne. I didn't invite Marcus to the signing. He would have asked questions I wasn't ready to answer honestly. I'd built that company over 3 decades, hauling freight, negotiating routes, calculating margins tighter than bone. But the paperwork wasn't just a sale. It was my split from all the hands I no longer trusted around my plate, especially the ones too eager to call me mom, when money was in earshot. That same evening, I sat in my home office with a legal pad and drafted a handwritten letter to each of my grandchildren. I didn't send them. Instead, I opened 3 trusts, one for Lily, one for Tyson, one for baby Eden, each under a unique name held anonymously through Carter Legacy Holdings. I funded them conservatively at first, $500,000 each, enough to grow, enough to protect. None of them, not Marcus, not Simone, not their advisors, knew. And that was the point. I had watched the temperature shift over the last 2 years. The way Simone started glancing at my wrist when I wore the vintage gold watch. The way Marcus flinched when I mentioned my new accountant. The questions that started floating around like dust. "What are your plans now, Ma? Ever thought about simplifying? Need help organizing any of the paperwork?" I didn't say no. I said I'd think about it. But I thought more clearly in silence, and by July I was done pretending we were still on the same side of the table. I filed all trust documentation through Jerome Ellis's firm using a third-party notary. No e-signatures. Everything physical, certified, logged. I didn't want a single keystroke of that money near Marcus's home office network. I scheduled recurring audits every 6 months with a private fiduciary who didn't attend the same brunches as Simone's estate lawyer friends. Discretion was the asset now. After that, I sat alone at my dining room table and stared at the signed sale agreement. The last page still smelled faintly of toner. It wasn't sadness. It was peace. Quiet, uncelebrated peace. By 4:30 p.m., the funds hit my holding account. By 5:12, they were split, shielded, and secure. The first thing I noticed was how often my calls started going to voicemail. Not just Marcus. He'd always had a lazy streak about calling back, but Simone too. And she never used to miss a chance to check in when she thought something was shifting financially. It started in late July, subtle at first. A missed birthday lunch, a vague excuse about Lily's dance rehearsal. The next week, Marcus arrived late to Sunday dinner without explanation, barely touched his plate, and kept glancing down at his phone like he was tracking something live. When I asked about the company's fourth quarter targets, he mumbled something about refocusing and then steered the conversation to my health. "You should rest more," Simone said the following week. "You've earned it, Denise. Travel a little. Decompress." That word, decompress, felt rehearsed, like it had been passed around in conversation before it reached me. I watched her cut her food with unnecessary precision, never looking up, as if the truth might leak out if she met my eyes. Her nails were fresh, longer than usual, tipped with diamond foil. Veronica had the same design the last time I saw her at a brunch in Georgetown. Their timing was never accidental. Then came the notification. Atlantic First Credit Union, 10:06 a.m., August 12th. Change alert. Primary account withdrawal authorization now directed to new email contact. $18,000. Recurring monthly transfer. A flag I'd set on the account years ago after watching a colleague's daughter drain a trust in 6 weeks. I called Tamika Rowe's direct line and left a message. "Tamika, it's Denise Carter. Something's wrong with account routing. I need eyes on this today." While I waited for the callback, I searched the email domain, Vericash Group. No proper website, just a placeholder page and a list of consulting services. The contact name listed at the bottom was V. Reeves. I didn't need to squint to recognize Veronica's maiden name. I logged into my account and froze all scheduled withdrawals above $5,000. Set new two-factor authentication tied only to my backup phone. Then I printed the entire month's statement and placed it into a red accordion folder I hadn't touched since my husband's funeral. By 3 p.m., Tamika confirmed. The change had not come from my login. Internal review opened immediately. By late August, the pieces started snapping together in a way that left no room for misunderstanding. After the email reroute, I ran my own search through every institution I had ever touched. Credit unions, mutual fund managers, even the old brokerage account Marcus used to help me set up back in 2012. I cross-referenced each with my social security number and full legal name, and 3 new accounts popped up. All were less than 90 days old. All listed addresses I'd never lived at. 2 in Maryland, 1 in Southeast D.C., tied to a P.O. box I hadn't touched since my freight depot moved locations in 2009. Each account had been opened under the name Denise E. Carter. But what tripped me wasn't the name. It was the signature on the documents. D.E. Carter. Nobody used that but my late husband, Daniel. And even then, only for business filings back when we were first getting Carter Logistics off the ground. He died in 2017, and I hadn't signed that way in over a decade. Seeing it scrawled beneath fake utility bills was like hearing his voice inside a lie. I requested all onboarding documentation from the banks and got back grainy scans, driver's license copies that looked almost real. Same headshot I used on my renewal from 2020, but something about the cropping felt off. Whoever cloned it hadn't adjusted the aspect ratio, and my chin looked stretched, cartoonish. The bills, one for water, one for gas, listed account numbers that didn't exist in city records. Both had been verified using e-signature software that conveniently accepted typed names in lieu of ink. There was no wet signature anywhere. I scheduled a forensic audit through Ellis & Bray Financial Security and paid the $4,200 retainer without blinking. A team of 2 analysts met me in person within 48 hours. They collected every suspicious document, cloned both my work and personal laptops, and pulled 2 weeks' worth of traffic from my home Wi-Fi router logs. At the same time, I logged into every financial institution I held and paused all wire transfers over $1,000. Recurring payments were flagged for manual approval. I called Tamika and asked her to set daily transaction alerts, not weekly. By August 29th, the audit team traced the forged bills to a recycled invoice template last accessed on a device registered to Simone M. Carter. On September 1st, I walked into Atlantic First Credit Union on 14th Street wearing a navy pantsuit and no jewelry. I didn't want anyone glancing at my wrists, my ears, or my neck, just the paper in my hand and the facts I'd come to confirm. Tamika Rowe met me by the private client entrance and ushered me through the side corridor, past the certificate display with our photo from 2017 when I funded the Carter Scholarship Initiative. She didn't smile this time, she just said, "Come on back," and pulled the frosted glass door closed behind us. She slid the folder across the table before I could speak. Inside, I found a scanned power of attorney document, dated July 18, 2025, filed under Carter, Denise. I skimmed the headers, skipping the boilerplate, until I saw the signature line. It was mine, sort of. It looked like my hand from 13 years ago, loopy, slower, with the faint tail on the C I stopped doing after Daniel passed. "Where'd they pull this from?" I asked. Tamika tapped a note clipped to the back. "Uploaded from a Gmail address registered under Simone's name. She submitted it to our digital verification queue on July 20th, 2 days after those unauthorized accounts were opened." "And it cleared?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "It flagged, but not high enough to block," she said. "The system saw a match to a 2012 file we had on record from your old business account, back when Marcus was co-signer." I kept my expression still, even as my fingers curled slightly against the table edge. "Why now?" "She claimed you were traveling long-term and had fallen behind on asset management. Said she needed to streamline legacy processes." It was word for word from the compliance script. Tamika handed me a printed chat log from their client services portal. Simone hadn't even changed the phrasing, just pasted it in like it was policy. "She tried to schedule an internal funds reallocation," Tamika added. "Didn't go through. We needed voice confirmation from you." She missed the callback window. I nodded, then leaned forward. "I want an internal lock placed on all POA changes. No digital submissions, in-person only, 2-point verification, and flag my profile for high-risk impersonation." Tamika didn't blink. "Already done, as of 9:02 this morning." Tamika passed me a second folder before I stood to leave. Manila, thick along the spine, fastened with a green clip like the ones Daniel used to keep on his workbench. She didn't say anything, just tapped it once and watched me open it. Near the top was a printout of a login attempt flagged by Atlantic First's fraud detection algorithm. August 23rd, 2:47 a.m., a browser in Alexandria, Virginia. That alone wasn't damning. Someone checking balances after hours, but the pattern of failures told the real story. 3 incorrect entries on the security question. "What was your childhood street?" Followed by 2 more on, "Who was your maid of honor?" Whoever it was didn't guess randomly. They knew the categories, just not the exact words I used back when I set them. Then the final attempt landed right. Correct answers entered, 2-step bypassed using the recovery option. The recovery email wasn't mine. Not a work account. Not one I'd ever heard before. Not until that moment, reading it in bold sans serif on a line item labeled breach level attempt, temporary lockout issued. The rest of the sheet blurred. I pulled out my old Motorola flip phone from my bag, powered it on, waited for the grainy boot up, and took a quick photo of the printout, just in case anything later got scrubbed. "Do we know how they got the recovery prompt changed?" I asked, voice flat. Tamika nodded once. "They initiated an account recovery sequence through our legacy platform. That side of the system still runs partial ID check only. We're retiring it next quarter. Not soon enough." I flipped the folder's next page. A list of device IDs tied to access attempts. One had a matching MAC address from a home network tagged under Marcus's name from back in 2022, when he helped install their smart thermostat and briefly used my Wi-Fi. I remembered Simone asking for the guest password again that weekend, said hers had disconnected. I thought nothing of it, just another quiet theft. "Does this email tie to any client account?" I asked. Tamika shook her head. "Not officially, but our back office flagged it. That domain's been linked to 3 prior fraud investigations, all dead-ended in arbitration. I slid the folder into my briefcase and looked at her. Next step's mine. Back in my condo that night, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the front hall by feel, set my briefcase down next to the umbrella stand, and headed straight for the back office. The space still smelled faintly of printer ink and lemon oil, the way Daniel liked it. I powered up my MacBook, slid my fingers across the trackpad, and watched the screen come to life. Too clean, too smooth. I knew now it had been opened when I wasn't looking. And I knew when. I'd taken the whole family to Rehoboth for the first weekend of August, rented the big house on Bay Avenue, the one with the wide porch and shallow steps for Eden's stroller. Everyone said they needed a break. Simone gushed about family bonding. Marcus played the grill master, and I let myself pretend, for 48 hours, that we were still intact. I stepped away from the laptop once, just once, to take Tyson down to the waterline with his kite. That must have been the window. I opened iCloud, clicked Files, and scrolled the access log. A timestamp at 2:13 a.m. on August 7th blinked back at me. One file opened. Estate 2024 final.pdf. The name alone made my stomach lurch. I kept that document buried in a secondary folder, hidden beneath 2 layers of mislabeled tax files. No one should have known it existed. It detailed the undisclosed trusts, property disbursement tiers, even the clause that excluded Marcus from direct control. I opened the file, checked the access history again. No changes, just a silent preview logged by someone using my IP on my machine. I clicked the share settings. One temporary link had been generated, sent via Apple Mail. That account hadn't been touched since 2021, until August 7th at 2:15 a.m. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out the Motorola, and took another photo of the screen, timestamp and all. I backed the file up to 2 encrypted drives, both disconnected from the internet. Then I printed the estate plan in full 31 pages, placed it in a fireproof envelope, and tucked it behind the radiator in my bedroom. My hands were steady the whole time. By midnight, I had logged every login, every detail, every trace. I had my proof. The following Sunday, I invited them over like nothing had shifted. I made the table look generous. Roast chicken, collard greens, cornbread, peach cobbler cooling on the counter. I kept my tone light, my movements slow, like a woman easing into retirement and leaning into domestic joy. Simone brought a bottle of white I didn't open. Marcus played with Tyson on the floor. I waited until we were all seated before I asked, with just enough casualness. So what's next for you, Simone? Professionally, I mean. She straightened a little, as if she'd expected the question but hadn't decided how much truth to give. Well, she began, twirling her fork against the plate's edge. I've been thinking more about financial independence. Consulting, maybe. Helping families plan for long-term care. Legacy structuring. She glanced at Marcus as she spoke, but he kept his eyes on his plate, carving the same slice of chicken twice. She rushed ahead. It just seems smart. You know, with everything changing. I nodded, took a slow sip of water, and asked, Everything? That's when she slipped into the speech, rehearsed but padded in casual language. Something about rising costs of elder care. Something about how my generation had built substantial wealth without modern protection strategies. Something about, quote, consolidating assets before the new year. I didn't interrupt. I wanted the whole thing. Her cadence was too smooth, too tight, like someone who'd practiced in front of a mirror and cut the parts that made her sound greedy. Marcus still hadn't looked up. He asked Tyson to pass the peas, just to avoid the silence that fell afterward. When Simone tried to loop me into agreement, don't you think simplifying now would save trouble later? I offered her a smile thin as thread and said I'd already started the process. Let her chew on that. After dinner, while Simone boxed leftovers and Marcus helped Eden with her shoes, I stood by the kitchen sink with the faucet running and wrote one sentence on a yellow sticky note. They're laying the tracks before they try to drive the train. I folded it in half and tucked it into the back of my daily ledger. Later that night, I rechecked the backup logs and saw that the estate document had been downloaded, twice. By the second week of September, I stopped waiting for them to trip and started pulling threads myself. I called Jerome Ellis directly and didn't bother with the small talk. He'd managed my business filings, estate documents, and property transfers for over 20 years. If anyone outside the family knew the full shape of my holdings, it was him. I asked if anyone had attempted to schedule estate consultations under my name. He didn't answer right away, just the sound of him breathing, then typing. There was an inquiry logged August 21st, he said finally. Came through the general line. Intake said it was urgent. I wasn't in that day. I told him to send everything. Full notes, metadata, and if any voice or video was attached, I wanted the raw files. He promised to have it forwarded within the hour. It came in under 40 minutes. PDF of the intake form, email trail, and a transcript of a Zoom intake call. The form listed my full name, birth date, and most of my address. Close enough that it would have passed casual verification. But the handwriting was unfamiliar. Loopy, round letters, a fake elegance. Under, quote, client health status, someone had written, increasingly fragile, early memory issues, needs assistance reorganizing assets. That alone made my teeth clench. But the line that froze me sat halfway down the second page. Client wishes to alter beneficiary hierarchy due to health concerns. Alter hierarchy. Not update, not review. Alter. I leaned forward, heart-hardening. It was clear what they were preparing for. If not legal incapacitation, then the illusion of it. Enough to justify shifting control. Enough to make any pushback look confused or emotional. I opened the audio next. Just under 8 minutes. A woman posing as me, voice hoarse, carefully measured, avoiding specifics. I've been feeling overwhelmed, she said. My daughter-in-law has been helping, and I want to make things easier in case something happens. There was no background noise, no coughs, no laughter, just Veronica's voice wearing my skin. I played it twice, then sent it to Jerome. Do not delete this file. Burn it to disk, archive it offline. Send me a copy by certified mail. He responded within minutes. Already in motion. I'm flagging your account for impersonation protocols. The voice didn't shake. That's what stayed with me most. Veronica didn't stumble once through the call. She used a gravelly tone. Not quite sick, but convincingly weary, the way a woman sounds when she's rehearsed frailty in her mouth for weeks. She answered the paralegal's questions with the careful caution of someone who knew where the landmines were and how to tiptoe around them. Yes, I'd prefer to move things into Simone's name, just temporarily. It's not that I don't trust my son. It's just, I need someone who understands these documents better. I sat in my kitchen, phone between my shoulder and ear, looping the playback while Jerome listened on the other end. He didn't interrupt. I think he knew this wasn't about the words anymore. It was about the contempt buried in their ease. This wasn't panic. This was process. Steps laid out in sequence, executed with calm precision, assuming I'd be too slow or too sentimental to catch them before they closed the loop. Did your office verify her ID before the call? I asked. We require submission post-intake, Jerome replied. But the impersonation didn't get that far. We flagged it when she couldn't produce the full security passphrase. What did she guess? He hesitated, then said, She answered Chestnut Street when asked about your father's first shop. The correct answer was Kennedy Market. Daniel would have laughed at that. Chestnut was where we bought our first apartment, not where anything began. I wrote that passphrase myself in 2014, after we caught a junior accountant siphoning petty cash. Never trust anyone who gets your origin story wrong, Daniel used to say. I logged into my estate planning portal and changed every access phrase, added biometric verification, then made an appointment at the recorder's office to formally update my signature card. From now on, no cursive, just block letters, print so clean it could be stenciled. That evening, I sat down and typed a personal affidavit outlining the impersonation attempt, notarized it at the 24-hour UPS store on U Street, and mailed certified copies to Jerome, Tamika, and the fraud division at my insurance provider. They wanted to act like I was fading. I was building a paper wall. On October 2nd, I took the elevator down to the District Fraud Bureau's office with a file box in one hand and a notarized affidavit in the other. The woman at the intake window wore her hair in a tight twist bun and didn't blink when I said I needed to file an impersonation report. She handed me a number, directed me to a molded plastic seat, and told me someone would be with me shortly. I waited 43 minutes. No one apologized for the delay, and I didn't expect them to. Bureaucracy doesn't move fast for anyone unless you're on fire or carrying a badge. Detective R. Hughes, mid-40s, wore plain clothes and the tired face of someone used to sifting lies from half-truths. He listened as I laid out the impersonation attempt, the fraudulent call, the forged documents, and the paper trail I'd traced from my own account down to Simone's inbox. I placed the Motorola on the desk between us and played the audio recording of Veronica's fake voice through the tinny speaker. His brows lifted, but he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he asked one question. "Do you fear for your physical safety?" "No," I said. "Just my legacy." He gave me the standard pamphlet, logged my formal statement, and handed me the report copy. Case ID number 9983-10DC. I slid it into my file folder and asked if I needed to file separately with financial crimes. He nodded and said, "We'll forward your affidavit, but keep a personal copy. These cases get slow once they leave our desk." I left that building with more certainty than I'd had in weeks. Once home, I moved room to room, wiping down every doorknob and drawer pull. Then I called LockTech Security and scheduled a biometric system install. No keys, no codes. Thumbprint access only. I added one emergency override. My estate attorney's fingerprint, stored offline. I composed 3 letters, one each to my HOA, Jerome, and Tamika, outlining the freeze. No access would be granted to any third party without written and recorded consent, with signatures verified in person. No amendments, no exceptions. Before bed, I opened my safe, removed the folder labeled Daniel Final Trust, and replaced it with a fresh envelope, new deed copy, redrawn will draft, and certified receipts. Everything sealed. The week before Halloween, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table just after 2 a.m., wrapped in a robe I'd had since before Marcus went to college. The house was still, but my mind wouldn't settle. The biometric locks had been installed, the safe reprogrammed, the alerts set. Everything was technically secure, but peace doesn't come from locks, not when the danger shares your blood. I stared across the table at the framed photo propped against the far wall. Marcus, 10 years old, grinning too wide, holding my first leather-bound ledger like it was a treasure map. I took that photo after our first year in profit. He'd helped me sort gas receipts by date, each one smudged with fingerprint ink and diesel dust. He'd begged to keep the ledger on his shelf that night, like it meant something to him. I wept without sound. Not for what they'd done. I was beyond shock, but because of the slow erosion of the boy in that photo. Somewhere between the hand-drawn pie charts and the degree in finance, between his first apartment and Simone's second pregnancy, he'd stopped seeing me as a builder and started seeing me as a vault. All numbers, no history. He let them strip me down to a balance sheet, sat still while they carved lines through my name and wrote theirs in place. What broke me wasn't the greed. People get greedy. It was the silence, the shrug, the quiet compliance of a man raised better than this. I hadn't fought for every contract and outlasted every recession to become a footnote in my own estate plan. And I sure as hell hadn't buried Daniel with a flag on his casket just to let his name get used like a skeleton key. By morning, I'd printed a new statement of financial intent. It included updated trust stipulations, fresh language on asset dispersal, and one critical amendment. Marcus was no longer listed as co-executor. I signed it in blue ink and scheduled a courier to Jerome's office by noon. I placed the revised copy beside the ledger Marcus once held. One taught him what building looked like. The other would remind him what betrayal costs. I called it a retirement celebration, because that's what they expected. The invites went out on embossed cardstock, trimmed in gold foil, sealed with the Carter Logistics logo in wax. A legacy toast, the heading read, honoring Denise E. Carter's years of service, vision, and success. I booked the main hall at the Langston Cultural Center, same place where I'd hosted Marcus's engagement party a decade earlier. Familiar venue, familiar faces. It gave them comfort. Let them think the waters were calm. The RSVPs flooded in fast. Former colleagues, industry partners, neighbors, the entire church board, and of course, family. Simone texted a smiling emoji and offered to help with setup. I told her it was handled. She asked about the guest list. I said it would be a surprise. That part was true. I kept the event staff tight and the AV technician under contract with a confidentiality clause. The slideshow was timed to begin with old photos of me and Daniel in the early warehouse days, transition into company milestones, and end with recent family snapshots. That's what the crowd would see. Until 8:41 p.m., I built the real presentation myself. 3 minutes long, one cut, no edits. I spliced the August 7th surveillance footage showing Simone in my home office, framed by the glow of my unlocked laptop, her fingers moving the mouse. No narration, just the timestamp on the bottom corner, and her face clear as glass. I let it linger, let it speak louder than anything I could say. I sent the video file to the AV tech on a flash drive marked Slideshow Final, and made sure he tested it behind locked doors. When I told him to pause the party visuals at my signal and run the file instead, he nodded without flinching. Family stuff? He asked. I said, something like that. I printed guest badges, made a speech outline, and ordered a single crate of Dom Perignon, not for the toast, but for symbolism. Simone had tried to turn that bottle into my exit. I would use it for my entrance. At 6 p.m. on October 31st, I arrived an hour early in a silver cape dress, pressed and quiet, and stood at the back while guests trickled in under strings of warm light. By 8:40, everyone was smiling. At 8:41 p.m., I gave the nod. The chandeliers dimmed, cutting the golden shimmer into something closer to candlelight. Laughter quieted. Glasses lowered. Everyone turned toward the main screen at the front of the hall, expecting baby pictures, retirement snapshots, maybe a few jokes about my early shipping invoices typed on a clunky IBM. What they got instead was a still frame, black and white, time-stamped, silent, of Simone standing in my home office, lit by the glow of my laptop. It took a moment for the room to register what they were seeing. The camera caught her from above, a wide angle that showed the Carter family photo on the wall behind her, the one she always claimed made her feel, quote, part of something. She was focused, hands moving fast, dragging windows across my desktop, clicking into files. The moment she opened Estate 2024 Final.pdf, I heard someone in the back whisper my name. The footage ran without interruption, just under 3 minutes. Simone adjusting the screen, glancing toward the hallway, snapping a photo with her phone. The cursor lingered over my beneficiary list like a scalpel. When the playback ended, the screen faded to black. I stepped forward. Some of you were told this was a celebration of my legacy, I said, my voice steady. And it is. But legacy isn't just about what you build. It's about what you protect. No one moved. Simone had gone still, a statue in designer heels. Veronica looked toward the doors, calculating her exits. I let the silence stretch. What you saw just now took place at 2:12 a.m. on August 7th during a family weekend in Rehoboth. That laptop was locked before I went to sleep. It was not when I woke. I turned to face the guests fully. Some of you in this room know how hard I worked to build what I have. Some of you watched me do it. But no one is entitled to rewrite that work behind my back. In the third row, my old operations manager whispered, Lord Jesus, under her breath. I took a long breath, letting the weight of the moment settle. This isn't drama. This is documentation. And I wasn't finished. They were frozen, but I wasn't. I lifted a second remote and pressed play again. This time, the screen split in half. On the left, A scan of the forged power of attorney Simone submitted to the bank. On the right, the notarized version of my signature from 2012. Side by side, the lie became obvious. The loops were wrong. The angle of the D wavered. A trained eye would catch it in seconds. I didn't speak over the evidence. I let it breathe. The screen shifted again. Now the audio recording from the impersonated estate intake played through the speakers. Veronica's voice, hoarse and dramatic, claimed I was too fragile to manage the estate and that I'd leaned on Simone to carry the burden. The words hung there, weaponized care dressed up as concern. The same woman who'd toasted me on my 65th birthday and called me sister in front of company. Guests weren't whispering anymore. They were watching each other, side-eyeing across rows, recalculating old conversations and glances they'd once ignored. And I still wasn't done. Next, I projected a screenshot of the forged utility bill, complete with the falsified address and outdated phone number, small details they never thought I'd catch. Underneath it, I displayed the IRS record showing the EIN for that clinic Veronica cited in her health affidavit had been revoked 18 months earlier. No patient files. No active license. Just a hollow shell used to justify a handover they thought no one would question. Then came the final slide, my bank logs. The rerouted $18,000 withdrawal, the flagged email address, and the failed security questions attempted at 2:47 a.m. from an Alexandria IP. I didn't have to say the name. Everyone in that room could connect the dots. I stepped away from the podium and held the silence until it stopped humming. Then I said, "This is what it looks like when people mistake your grace for absence, when they think your stillness means surrender. But I've kept ledgers longer than they've kept secrets." Behind me, the screen went dark. I walked back to the center of the floor and waited for someone, anyone, to speak. The first person to move was Tamika. She stepped forward from the far corner in a deep burgundy suit, sharp as always, heels clicking against the polished floor with quiet purpose. She didn't need a mic. Her voice was calm, clear, the kind of voice people lean toward because it never has to shout. "I can confirm," she said, eyes sweeping across the room, that Simone M. Carter attempted to add herself as Denise Carter's power of attorney using a 2012 signature pulled from an outdated archive. She claimed Denise was incapacitated and traveling. I blocked the request. Internally, we flagged the attempt as potential fraud. People began shifting in their chairs now, some uncomfortable, others openly stunned. I watched two former clients whisper to each other, one of them shaking her head slowly, mouthing the word, "Why?" Simone stood locked in place, arms at her sides, expression unreadable. She knew there was no walking this back. Veronica, seated near the back, scoffed like the air had insulted her. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, rising halfway, trying to reclaim control. "You're twisting details. You don't understand what?" I cut her off without raising my voice. "We traced the IP address used to access my estate files. It came from your home network, Veronica. August 7th, 2:15 a.m. I've documented the access logs, cross-referenced timestamps, and captured screenshots. Would you like me to pass those around next?" She sat down slowly. No further words. I turned to Marcus then. He hadn't said a thing the entire evening. His face held nothing I recognized. No outrage, no defense. Just the uneasy stillness of a man watching something he helped set in motion roll out of control. For a moment, I thought he might stay silent. But then, finally, he cleared his throat. "I didn't know it went that far," he said quietly. "I thought it was just planning. I didn't authorize anything." I held his gaze. "You didn't stop anything either." He looked down. Then, for the first time since my retirement announcement, he said something that mattered. "I'm stepping down from co-managing your affairs. Effective immediately." I nodded once. The only sound in the room was the soft clink of an untouched champagne flute. The room didn't erupt. It unraveled. Gasps faded into a low thrum of voices as guests turned to one another, trying to reshape what they thought they knew. Simone's tears came not with apology, but with exposure. She stood there, makeup holding but resolve crumbling, her face cycling through panic, disbelief, and something close to fury. Veronica no longer tried to speak. She reached for her clutch with jerky fingers, muttered something sharp under her breath, and made for the exit. No one stopped her. I didn't follow their retreat with my eyes. I'd already seen enough of what they looked like when they thought I wasn't watching. What struck me most wasn't the shame on their faces. It was the way people began to shift around me, physically and emotionally. Old friends, colleagues, even two of my former competitors approached, nodding, pressing my hand. No pity in their touch. Recognition. The kind you give a woman who survived something calculated. One by one, they became witnesses, not bystanders. Reverend Carter came up to me quietly and said, "I hope you know this was righteous." I told him it wasn't righteousness I was after. It was truth. Then I excused myself to the far corner and dialed Jerome. "Did you get the video files?" I asked. "Just finished reviewing them," he said. "I've drafted a supplemental statement for the DA's office. I'll file it first thing Monday. Include Marcus's verbal relinquishment," I added. "Time-stamp the footage. Full transcription." He paused. "Are you ready for the next step?" "I've been ready. Let's proceed with the formal filing." As the music resumed, softer now, out of obligation more than celebration, I made my way to the refreshment table, peeled the seal off a bottle of Dom Perignon, and poured one glass. I didn't drink it. I placed it in the center of the table, untouched, a full circle left standing where something poisonous had nearly begun. Guests filtered out slower now, some hugging me, others nodding from a distance. Marcus didn't try to explain anything else. He kissed Eden on the head, helped Simone gather her coat, and walked out without looking back. I let the doors close behind them. 3 weeks later, on November 20th, the letter came on official district letterhead, crisp and direct. The DA's office confirmed the filing of formal charges: identity fraud, attempted financial exploitation of a senior, and digital impersonation across state lines. The words weren't dressed up, just facts laid bare in black ink. Simone's name appeared first. Veronica's followed. I read it once, twice, then tucked it into the same red accordion folder that had traveled with me to the bank, the lawyer's office, and the police department. Restitution proceedings had begun. It wasn't about the money. I'd made sure of that. My assets were secure, my trusts intact, and my holdings now monitored by a fiduciary team I personally selected, none of them with ties to Marcus or his circles. But the process mattered. It meant there would be a record, something heavier than suspicion, something that would live in court files, not whispers. That morning, Jerome sent a courier envelope with no return label, just his initials and a single instruction: private delivery, hand only. Inside was a notarized copy of the revoked power of attorney form, marked void in blue across the top. Beneath it, my updated estate directive, reflecting every change I'd initiated since September. No more shared access. No more backup copies handed out just in case. From now on, if someone needed to cross my threshold, they'd have to knock and be invited. Later that night, I returned the framed photo of Marcus with the ledger to its place on the bookshelf. I didn't turn it face down. I wasn't erasing history. I was redrawing the boundary between what was built in trust and what had tried to claim it. I turned off the lights, locked the door behind me, and for the first time in months, I slept without checking the hallway camera.